Okay, so this is a basic introduction to Illustrator. Again, I'm using an older version of Illustrator, but all the stuff that we're going to do today is applicable to all versions of Illustrator, right? Very simply, I asked you guys to get a picture from the internet and to draw something with Illustrator, and I just used the paintbrush here to draw a line like that, all right? The reason I wanted you to see this is the main difference between Illustrator and Photoshop is this. Get your zoom tool and zoom way in at the picture to the point where you start seeing pixels. Okay? Pixels, which you should know as a millennial, are these little tiny squares of color information. This is what Photoshop uses, and the main difference between Photoshop and Illustrator is Illustrator uses these on pictures because that's what pictures are made of. But when Illustrator draws something, I'm going to hold the Alt key to zoom out with my magnifying glass. You can see here on the edge of this Illustrator line, I can no longer zoom in anymore, and that line is perfect. There are no pixels. Okay? Illustrator works in vectors. And I'm going to type that right in here so that you see it, know it, learn it. V-E-C-T-O-R-S. Vectors are a mathematical calculation of a line based upon anchor points. And there they are. Right? These anchor points are magnificent because in Photoshop, if I were to paint something, right, it would be pixels, and the only thing I could do was either repaint it, erase it, add to it, by painting more. Vectors in Photoshop can be moved all day long and adjusted in any which way you want to in order to meet whatever shape you need them to. They can also be combined, subtracted from, expanded, and all sorts of wonderful things. Right now I've got this vector line, right, that I'm going to loop around the word vector. I can go to Object and expand its appearance, and now it has anchor points on the outside instead of running through the inside. So that I could take any part of this and expand this whole line to be a larger shape. Each vector point also, if it is a bent vector point on a segment of a line like this, has these control arms next to it. That's what I call them anyway. And they will further adjust. Gentlemen, chill. No. They will further adjust the points and the directions in which they bend and the amount in which they bend by how far away from that original anchor point you pull them. Okay, so practical applications here. One, if we're going to make a face, we're going to draw over somebody's face. You can do that quickly with any sort of drawing tool, like the brush. You can zoom in to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be, or putting your lines where you need them. Where's that brush again? Right? Like so. But if, let's say, you miss a little bit and you want to make a slight adjustment, you just go back in with this white arrow. The black arrow, or your move tool, is going to move your whole object, whereas your white arrow is going to move your individual anchor points and their control arms so that you can adjust that line and make it perfect. Whoops, I'm moving my picture. You can get those lines exactly where you want them to be with minor adjustments. And you can zoom in all day to get these things. You can add in anchor points where you need them and delete anchor points where you don't need them. And that all comes here from the pen tool, which is the most amazing of tools and will take a little while to get used to. The basic operation of the pen tool is this. You click where you want a line to begin, like here on the edge of the inside of the nostril. Click at the end of whatever bend you want to go. So there's a bend going down here. I'm going to click there and hold, and as I drag away, my line will bend up to follow my curve. Now Illustrator's also going to try to predict my next curve, but I usually will click back on my last point. It releases the initial control arm. Let me zoom in a little bit. I click back on that last point, and then I move ahead, click and hold and drag, click back, move ahead, click and hold and drag. Now, there are some advantages to just moving on. If you saw there, and I'll redo that, it kind of predicts for you right? A smooth transfer around your point. Sometimes that's good. Where that's not good is, let's say I want to move on to the next spot. I have to release this line. Just click off to any other tool. Go back to your pen tool. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Let's say I'm tracing the mouth, right? And I'm clicking, hold and drag. Good, it's predicting real nicely here. Click and hold and drag a little bit. Click and hold and drag. Everything's wonderful with my click and hold and drag up until the end. But now I want to come back this way, and it does this little loop here that I don't really want. I want it to come back in. Right? I want my angle to go this way, and it's forcing me out. That's where I really have to re-click that last point. And then I can come back in here and get my line going in. Right? So if your predictive curve is not doing what you want it to do, you just Control Z to go back. Remember our keyboard shortcuts? Re-click that last point, and then you can make whatever new curve you want to yourself. Again, your white arrow is for adjusting these things, individual points, and the control arms associated with them. Whoa, can't see my line anymore. Which gets me to the next point. Why I can't see my line anymore. This part is different from Photoshop as well. In Photoshop, we have a foreground color and a background color. In Illustrator, we have a stroke and a fill. The difference is this. If I turn on my fill in the front, which is the whole box, and click on a color, it fills it in. There's a little flip-flop arrow here that will take that color and move it over to the stroke, and you can see the difference there. Right now the color's on the edge. You can have a fill and a stroke that are two totally different colors if you want to. Let's make it more obvious. Right? And you also have a whole menu called the stroke menu where you can adjust the thickness of your stroke, the caps or the corners. You see how that changed? Rounded joints, beveled joints, miter joints. And you can align that stroke to the inside or the outside or on the center of your vector line. Right? You can even do dashed lines and stuff like that, although I haven't found real good practical applications for that. So you've got stroke size. Below 1, you can even get down to 0.25, little tiny stroke lines that are there. 0.5 is little. You can see that a little better. All right? So we've got a lot here in just that to play with. Getting used to our pen tool, getting used to stroke and fill versus foreground and background color, knowing that you can select any one of these things and turn them to none, or fill them with a gradient, which then you have to use the gradient tool as well as the gradient menu over here to adjust the type of gradient, right? And there's lots and lots and lots more stuff to learn, like combining shapes and stuff with our Pathfinder, which is super fun. Let me get that. Boom. You can take any square and another square. Go to my Pathfinder, select them both, and I can either unite them or divide them. I just united them, right? Made them one square. Or let's say I want to take a chunk out of that and make it like a Swiss cheese. Put some circles in here. I should probably make those in a different color. Nope. What am I doing? Make that. Flip it. Take the stroke off. Okay. Again, with my move tool and my alt key, I can make copies. Remember that from Photoshop? You can do that in here too. The black arrow and the alt key together. You can make copies of something all day. So I'm going to shift and select all these guys and this. With my Pathfinder, I'll hit this divide one. And then I can select just the circles with shift and delete them, and they've been cut out of that. Okay? Pen tool and Pathfinder, probably the two most useful things you can do in Photoshop. I mean in Illustrator, sorry. Please try today to make as much as you can before we leave an illustration of the image that you brought into Illustrator using the pen, brush, fills, and strokes. Good luck.